What's up, everybody? Welcome in to a sad edition of SSPN Postgame, Ethan.
Mm.
We really shouldn't be this sad because we still got to see a lot of crazy stuff from Wemby tonight. But the fact that he was taken out of the game for a good majority of it was a tough pill to swallow whenever it comes to Spurs fans' excitement, to say the least, Ethan.
Mm.
Um, Man, I don't even know how to get into this game to start. I mean, we could pull up the box score just to start, but maybe before we get into the game itself, Ethan, because there will be some negatives that we'll harp on there. Let's just talk about kind of the energy tonight that you saw in the Frost Bank Center. Like, I see our man Nick here. He says, "We are so back." And I think the reason that he's still saying that, despite tonight's loss, was because of all the vibes, because of the positives that you did see from Wemby. But at the same time, as our man Drew King says, it was a rock hard pill to swallow. And
Mm.
is kind of how you felt with the way that the team closed out the game. So I guess let's start there, Ethan, because there were more positives kind of throughout the other three quarters, other than, of course, Wembanyama in the fourth quarter, who we probably should have gotten the ball to more, which is probably where you'll start.
Yeah, I think the entire game, it really came down to what you said toward the end of our last live, Jude, which was we have yet to really see this version of the Spurs play a four-quarter game. We started out terrific, like you said. We'll get into those details later. First quarter with 43 points. We looked unbelievable. And from that point forward, it was just the energy took a dive. And, we can blame the refs to some extent. Was it a poorly called game? Sure, I'm sure the Mavericks could say the same thing.
Very true.
To me, it was just a little inconsistent. Like sometimes they were calling the tickiest, tackiest, cheapest fouls, and then other times they were letting guys really just hack each other, both sides of the ball. So I would have liked to have seen a little bit more consistency there, but I'm not going to blame the
Right.
Spurs woes completely on that. It was a lack of energy. It was Wemby not being in the game. Some ill-advised plays down the stretch. As much as I love Keldon Johnson, there's no excuse for driving into double coverage and spinning into a defender and losing the ball at the end
Twice in a
of the game.
row.
Yeah, that's just inexcusable, man. He's got to be better than that. He has to understand where the defense is. And personally, Jude, I think you agree with me here. At that point in the game, I'd rather the ball be in Devin Vassell's hands. Like, I love Keldon Johnson to death. I think he's a terrific player, underrated as far as what he does for us offensively. But Devin Vassell is just a more natural shot creator and shot maker. I want the ball in his hands in that situation. And you
Him
touched
or
on
Wemby, at
it. Yeah, him
least,
or Wemby.
like one of those two guys. And the other thing, not to interrupt you here, I'll
Go
let
ahead.
you get back on your point. But the thing that sucks about Keldon is he had a really good game
He
tonight,
did.
other than that fourth quarter. And you know that all the people on Twitter are going to be focusing in on that, like blah blah blah.
Yeah.
When it's like really, he had like almost a near triple double midway through the third quarter. But
Mhm.
still, got to improve. And you're absolutely right.
Yep, 17, 9 boards, 7 assists for Keldon Johnson on 7 for 15 shooting. Really, like you said, phenomenal night until the last like 5 minutes of that fourth quarter where he kind of just struggled to find an open look and made some ill-advised decisions. But I agree with what you said about Wemby in that fourth quarter. He looked phenomenal at the beginning of that fourth quarter when he finally actually got into the game. Um, I would have liked to have used him offensively a little more inside. I felt like we had an advantage there, even with Derek Lively playing out of his mind and being a physical 7'1" center for the Mavericks. Even, like it felt like to me in the preseason, we got him a lot more action in the high post. Tried to get him some low post touches, some mid range jumpers, and we really didn't see that until the fourth quarter when he kind of re-caught fire a little bit. So I would have liked to have seen that in the first three quarters. Again, I know he was in foul trouble, but it seemed to me like he was really playing along the perimeter and taking a lot of threes. Let's see, he was 3 for 5 from 3-point land, so he was making them at least. But even still, he's much more of a threat when he's in that mid range or low post area.
Yeah, we didn't get to see, as many rim runs or kind of cuts to the basket, probably as we would have liked. But I mean, there's more. Just as we said, we just didn't see him get the ball as much as we would have liked in general.
Hmm.
And I think that just kind of if we want to have some game one diagnosis here, there's not too much you can take away. Um,
No.
is that like you said, we're still a young team and we're still learning how to win. And that was really the epitome of that fourth quarter because it was just disorganized turnovers, trying to run too fast, even the last
Mhm.
shot, like we waited way too long for that last shot. We had 28 seconds. We didn't get the last shot up and it was a bad shot. It was like you could have gave it to Wemby on the handoff, but we waited to give it to Devin. And I get that. Like I like Devin taking the shot, but in that scenario, we should have got the shot off quicker and you had the opportunity to give it to Wemby. And it's like he was shooting well from three the whole night.
Mhm.
Kind of as you just mentioned. And so and just the fact that he can shoot over everybody, as we've mentioned at nauseum.
Mhm.
That was just a tough ending sequence there, Ethan.
For sure, for sure. And it doesn't help Jude either that Luka Doncic had 33 points, 14 rebounds, and 10 assists.
Yeah.
Um, that's never easy to overcome. Saying that though, it didn't feel like we were playing poorly overall defensively. It just felt like he was taking advantage of Jeremy's over aggressiveness at times, and then of
Yeah.
course he has a size mismatch on pretty much everybody else aside from Jeremy. But Jeremy's just not as quick as Luca, not as experienced. So these are things that we have to overcome and learn from. Like we say all the time, you can't stop guys like this, but you'd hope we could slow them down a little bit better than what we did tonight.
Yeah, and the other thing, when you mentioned that there, Ethan, is the fact that we did play some better defense earlier in the game. Like
Very
there
true.
were, in the first quarter, we were texting, and Jeremy was able to get a steal on like a pass, on a bounce
Mhm.
pass that was supposed to easily go to Luca. So I think, and that's where it once again it kind of goes back to the young team theme, because it's like
Mhm.
when you see some of those positives that we saw in the first quarter, and even just earlier in the game as well. The fact that they didn't continue in the most important moments of the game is just another, little, I guess, reminder mark there of the youth of this team and the things that they still have to learn for winning games down the stretch. As much as, last year it was all about learning to win games, and as much as we're so hyped, and we're about to get into the positives because there were a lot earlier in the game. There were a lot of things that I saw that were
Mhm.
better. But when it comes to that last stretch, unfortunately, it was, we were more in the game, but it was still the same result in the way that we kind of blew it away.
For sure. For sure.
Alrighty. Well, we can kind of get into some of the earlier stuff here, Ethan. I took quarter by quarter notes. I didn't really take fourth quarter notes because I just kind of had my full reaction,
Mhm.
kind of as we just talked about it there. But one more thing that I'll get into before I get into just some of the other quarters is, you mentioned the refs, and I was texting you about it, and I was real upset about it. But even with that being said, it was both ways, and I
Mhm.
don't think that lost the game as much as it is really frustrating. And my guy, a tone of Euro Kobe said here, he says those nitpicky fouls killed our momentum so much. They let both sides play in the fourth, which we should have been in the whole game. Shake my head. I do
Mhm.
feel like they killed our momentum, but it's also like some of them technically by the rule, were still the right call. And
Yep.
then even though they don't get called every time, but still. And then the other part of that is that's just a part of the game. Sometimes that happens and you have to overcome that and
Mhm.
and not let it kill your momentum, which once again goes back to the symptoms of a young team. But um getting into the earlier parts of the game, there were some runs,
Mhm.
during those foul trouble. I think probably the most impressive thing despite the finish, whenever I look at the roster as a whole, is the fact that we were able to keep it a game going into the fourth quarter, specifically in those second and third quarters, when Wemby got into foul trouble. Now, I know we weren't able to really like run away with it or take any momentum. And I'm not saying it's perfect, but I will say that was a positive when you consider, I mean, how much of our defensive scheme and what we do offensively as well is
Mhm.
centered around the attention that he grabs and what he does defensively.
Yes, I agree with you. Those are definitely positives. It really wasn't like the Mavs didn't take the lead until I think 75-73.
Yeah.
And you're right. We went on a couple runs there that were very impressive. I thought Zach Collins did a great job in that first half, kind of finding his shot and keeping us just slightly ahead when the Mavericks were starting to find their momentum. It was like, okay, let's slow things down, get it to Zach, let him do what he does in the low post. Keldon Johnson, the same thing. Devin Vassell, just an absolute unit tonight with 23 points, 9 for 17. He kept us afloat for a majority of those three quarters. It hurts. It hurts when you lose in this fashion, Jude.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm losing my train of thought.
You're
Trey
good. You were
Jones
talking about
was
Keldon, I believe.
Yeah, Keldon. I mean, I pretty much said what I want to say
Yeah.
about Keldon. It's so late. It's way past my bedtime. Trey Jones was pretty solid after coming off the bench for us at 5 for 7, 16 points tonight. Really did open up his offensive game like we had guessed it would, coming off the bench surrounded by shooters. He was huge as far as
Yes.
refinding our momentum and revitalizing our offense. I saw some comments earlier saying that we should have kept him in at the end of the game instead of putting in Jeremy. I understand the logic there. I felt like we still kept Trey in for quite a long time, honestly, longer than I expected us to. He played with the starters a good majority of that fourth quarter, um, and I think that that was a positive. I think that Trey Jones may have to close some games for us like this because, in situations playing against veteran teams like the Mavericks, it does come down to just making quality decisions, and Trey Jones may have made a better decision on the stretch than Jeremy or Keldon, depending on who you wanted to sub him out for. So definitely a huge shout out to him. Uh, Chetty Osman, 12 points.
There you go. That's a good one. No, when you talked about Trey, that was one of the things I had written down. I had it specifically in the third quarter, but
hmm
overall he was a solid player. And hey, I gotta shout out my boy Swatcho Bros. Trey Elephant Jones. What he is referencing is the Mavericks scouting report. They
Yep.
had Elephant for Zach and they had Elephant for Trey. And I kind of thought they were wrong about both. I will admit tonight I think they proved they were right about Zach. God bless him. Not saying I'm not saying Zach sucks or anything, but I'm just saying, they attacked him. Derek
Mhm.
Lively attacked him, that's for sure. But Trey, on the other hand, he was able to kind of prove him that he's not as easily as attackable as they think. Really, I think what I saw from him down the stretch is, like I said in that third quarter, was he made some offensive plays that we hadn't really, not to say we hadn't seen from him before, but we hadn't seen from him in this sense, if that makes sense. I don't know if it does. It probably doesn't. But
A little bit, yeah. I mean, he was more conservative last year. This year, he feels a little bit more chaotic and forceful.
he really, that's what I was thinking more. He really forced his shot more. Like he was
hmm
looking for his shot, going and getting layups, stuff like that. So I really like to see that from him in the third quarter. Um, just because, like I said, we haven't really seen him kind of be able to showcase that role. That's what I was trying to get to. My brain was rambling there for a second. But we talked about how whenever he comes off the bench, that's going to open things up for him offensively. I believe that's what we saw tonight. I don't think we saw it in full force, but I think we
hmm
did get to see some glimpses of that as well. Um, but other than just individually, Ethan, probably the other thing that people want to talk about, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, is the defense. I know we talked about, obviously, with Luka and Kyrie, there's only so much you can do.
hmm
Um, we did see, we saw some good things from Jeremy, and then we also saw him get taken advantage of. Now, like we said, that the preface still applies there, but at the same time, that did happen. Um, what was kind of your thoughts overall on the team defense tonight? I know it's kind of tough to evaluate because Wemby didn't play a lot, but what were your thoughts on it? What were some improvements that you saw? What were maybe
hmm
some things that are still going on?
The intensity was still there, even when we were losing momentum. I think what kills us is fighting over screens and staying with really talented ball handlers and playmakers. When Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving are going off a screen and rolling, we're fighting over it like we should because those are capable shooters. We get stuck behind them and they're able to
Mm-hmm.
make incredible plays. And that's where they went on a huge run led by Derek Lively and Luka Doncic, where we just couldn't stop that two-man game. And I don't know what the fix is there. I'm not a basketball expert in that
Right.
sense. I don't know what the scheme change has to be or the personnel change. But that was a problem in preseason, and it's just exponentially aggravated even more when you're guarding somebody like Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, who are just two of the best ball handlers in the history of the NBA at this point. Um, but aside from that not small, big detail, rotation still looks solid. Um, Intensity looks solid. It's just going to be a matter of trusting each other, finding that chemistry, and continuing to get reps with the various rotations. And like you said, it doesn't help when Wemby can only play 23 minutes and is in foul trouble because that takes away his aggressiveness. And he is huge, as we saw in preseason, as being the anchor down low for us. Just knowing that you have a guy back there or to your right or left, depending on what position he's playing at the time, that could really clean up a lot of those mistakes.
Yeah, and when the thing that sticks out to me in my mind when I think about the defense is probably the interior. But
Mhm.
the key to that is Wembanyama not playing the whole time. Like as much as we saw a lot of struggles from Zach tonight, and he looked kind of tired down the
He did.
stretch. Is he working as hard if Wemby's playing the normal rotations and stuff like that? Now, it was a little disappointing. I'm not gonna lie. It is just one game, so there's I'm not trying to say anything definitive here at all,
Yeah.
but. uh, Even with Wemby out, Zach, to me, in my opinion, looked a little bit better in the preseason physically.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's just an example of how the preseason is not always indicative. Like
Yeah.
even one game, the intensity is just completely different. Um, so that was probably like if I had to say like my biggest disappointment of the night was just Zach kind of getting worked a little bit, but
Mhm.
the fact that Wemby didn't play definitely affected that. So it's not like 100% his fault, is I guess what I would say.
1,000%. And who could have predicted? As much as I love Derek Lively, I never would have expected him to have 16 points and
Forgot
10
about this
rebounds.
too.
Oh, that is true. Zach is coming off of an illness. Maybe that did affect him. Um, and you know what? Take all this with a grain of salt because we did watch 6 games in the preseason with these same lineups, with these same players, and we had a lot of glowing things to say about Zach's physicality, Zach's interior defense, Jeremy's playmaking, Trey coming off the bench, Keldon's decision making. It's gonna be a game to game thing, and this is going to be something that will take some time. I'm not ready to make any
Right.
drastic changes yet, Jude. I'm waiting till Christmas time to make any drastic changes as far as like somebody has to be taken out of the rotation, somebody's got to be
Right.
taken out of the starting unit. Those things are going to take a couple months to figure out.
We're reacting to tonight, but
Mhm.
nothing that we say is definitive because we
For
realize it's
sure.
one game in an 82 game season. Okay, so here's something I also want to talk about that probably a lot of people, it'll be tough to hear considering the circumstances tonight. Keldon Johnson with 7 assists. He really should have had like 3 or 4 more. There were some wide open shots that it was
Mhm.
a Zach Collins three. There are some others that I'm forgetting as well. I believe Shetty missed one also. And the point is, you really got to see his playmaking flourish
Yeah.
tonight in ways that I hadn't seen before. And that's another thing that ties into kind of this lineup as a whole. And you saw sometimes too when Pop did get frustrated with Sohan when he was just really like struggling and maybe like not locked in. Um,
Mhm.
and that's not to say that Sohan's not locked in defensively, but I think even y'all saw tonight, like Sohan does some cheeky stuff. He tries to, early in the game, we forget about it because of the way that the game ended, but there was like some little cheeky fouls. He kind of got away with a little bit of an overreach, you know.
Mhm.
I can't describe it perfectly, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. His elbow kind of hit,
Mhm.
I think Tim Hardaway Jr. in the back of the head. That's when he was laying on the floor like that.
Yep.
There's a lot of little cheeky stuff that Sohan does. So I think Pop is trying to make sure, like, hey, you can't be so carefree sometimes. Yes, we do want you to sometimes take advantage of matchups, but sometimes you shouldn't just drive it in. Like, you still got to set up the offense. It's going to be a work in progress. As he said, as you and I have said, as Pop has said, and this
Mhm.
is the lineup that they're rolling with. I understand people's frustrations, but this is what they're doing. So you're just going to have to deal with it, whether you like it or not. But, like, I mean, and maybe, midway through the season, there are some changes made. But like you said, Ethan, you're kind of waiting until Christmas, maybe after the in-season tournament would be a good little
Yeah.
benchmark. I forget how close that is. Like that's starting in like a
Couple
week.
of yeah, a week.
Right. That there's going to be a lot of it's just not a good idea to make anything super definitive off one game.
No, not at all. I mean, Doug McDermott, who we thought was going to have like a major role coming off the bench, or at least I did, had 11 minutes tonight and
Yeah.
only took one shot and missed that one shot.
And he didn't come in until like I think like late in the second or the third
Mhm.
quarter or something. We were mainly kind of rolling with a 9 man where it was Shetty, who
Mhm.
was kind of taking his minutes. And I did like a lot of those lineups that we saw. I saw somebody else in the comments earlier. I'm trying to find it. Um, but anyway, here we go. Victor says it. I feel like we played our best when Dev, Shetty, Keldon, and Wemby lineup was out there. And maybe that, I don't know. I'd have to really go back and look at all of the lineups that played. But the point is, I really like when Shetty's out there with kind of the main guys. Another one is Sohan, Devin,
Mhm.
uh, Wemby, Shetty, and and Keldon. And actually, no, scratch that. Wemby wasn't out there. That was Zach. But that was like one of our better lineups that I saw tonight as well. And that was something I liked in the preseason also. There really weren't 2 minutes. I guess I say that's one of our better lineups, but there's really not too much. There's not enough really to definitively say that yet, just when it comes to tape. But I liked what I saw from that lineup. That's probably a better way to put it.
For sure. And you know what's going to fix a lot of these problems that we talked about today, Jude? Wemby not being in foul trouble, watching some film, understanding when he can and cannot put his hand in the cookie jar, etc., etc., and just having game one jitters out of the way.
Yes.
Let's sit back, let's get into a groove of things and find our chemistry. I think game two should be, knock on wood, a great turnaround for these guys.
Yeah. The game would have been completely different if not even saying that like the maybe we still would have lost, maybe we would have won. It doesn't matter. The game would have been completely different if Wembanyama played how, our rotations would have had him, if he wouldn't have gotten foul trouble. So that's, it sucks that we kind of have to wait another one to see that, because we really wanted to see that tonight. And that's why it was frustrating. But like you said, that also has a huge impact. So all the stuff that we're criticizing tonight, might be a little bit nitpicky in like 3 weeks when we see what the team really looks like when he's not, and got 4 fouls in the first 2 quarters.
1,000%, Jude, 1,000%.
All right, here's my final thing, because we're going to get out of here, guys. We appreciate all of you guys being in the comments. I know it's a little bit quick, but, Ethan's got work tomorrow. The only way that he can make this happen is if he makes that happen. You know what I'm saying? So,
thank you.
Devin Vassell.
Yes.
Is the contract too expensive?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either, bro.
The dude's a stud, bro. He's not the reason at all that we lost this game. He's the reason we were up for a majority of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And he went 1 for 6. He hits 1 or 2 more of those threes. Guys swinging momentum. Like,
it doesn't even feel like he went 1 for 6. Like, no, it doesn't. All.
It does not, because he was feasting off a steady diet of mid-range jumpers and really finishing at the rim with great strength over some of those bigs down there for Dallas. It was a physical game, and he didn't shy away from any of it. Definitely a solid game from Devin Vassell. I have 0 negatives to talk about from him.
Yeah. Well, Ethan, do we have any final thoughts, overall thoughts on the game here before we wrap things up?
I don't think so, Jude, but this is just my favorite time of the year. When Spurs fans are calling for every player to be cut, and for all-time winningest coach, 5-time champion Greg Popovich to be fired. Just can't get better than late October basketball.
Oh my gosh. Here's one other player we forgot to mention who, if you look at the stat sheet, you won't think much of, but our boy Chuck Bass, Charles Bassey. He played a solid game tonight. Nothing crazy, but he played his role. I liked how he was physical in there.
Good for Chuck Bass. I'll give you that. Good for Chuck Bass. He played okay. He had himself a night.
Yeah. You didn't really notice him, but it was in a good way. You know what I mean?
Agreed.
All righty, y'all. We appreciate you guys hanging out and just dealing with this loss with us tonight. That was me kind of just waiting until we get this up. Don't forget to hit that like and that subscribe button if you enjoyed the content tonight, and to follow us all season long for all of the post games we're going to do for Wemby's first season in the NBA. And be sure to follow us on Twitter at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. We appreciate you guys. We'll catch y'all in the next one. We'll see y'all later.